The War for Independence. The opposing sides. On the day that the Continental Congress voted for independence, the British began landing troops in New York Harbor. By mid-August, they had assembled some 32,000 men under the command of General William Howe. British officials did not expect the rebellion to last long. The British troops, called Redcoats because of their uniforms, were disciplined, well-trained, and well-equipped. Compared to the British troops, the Continental Army was inexperienced and poorly equipped. Throughout the war, it struggled to keep its recruits and pay their wages. Although more than 230,000 men served in the Continental Army at various times, it rarely numbered more than 20,000 at any one time. Many soldiers deserted or refused to re-enlist when their terms were up. Others left their posts and returned to their farms at planting or harvesting time. Paying for the war was equally difficult. Lacking the power to tax, the Continental Congress issued paper money. These Continentals were not backed up by gold or silver and became almost worthless very quickly. Fortunately, Robert Morris, a wealthy Pennsylvanian merchant and banker, personally pledged large amounts of money for the war effort. Morris also set up an efficient method of buying rations and uniforms, arranged for foreign loans, and convinced the Congress to create the Bank of North America to finance the military. The Continental Army was not the only force the British had to worry about. British troops also had to fight local militias. The militias were poorly trained, but they fought differently. They did not always line up for battle. They hid behind trees and walls and ambushed British troops and supply wagons. Then they disappeared. This kind of fighting is called guerrilla warfare, and it is very difficult to defeat. Another problem for the British was that they were not united at home. Many merchants and members of parliament opposed the war. The British had to win quickly and cheaply. Otherwise, opinion in parliament would shift against the war. The United States did not have to defeat Britain. It simply had to survive until the British became tired of paying for the war. The European balance of power also hampered the British. The French, Dutch, and Spanish were all eager to exploit Britain's problems. As a result, Britain had to station most of its military elsewhere in the world to defend its empire. The European balance of power also meant that the Patriots might be able to find allies against the British. All of these factors meant that the British needed to win quickly. To do so, they had to convince the rebellious American colonies that their cause was hopeless. At the same time, the British had to make it safe to surrender. If the Patriots thought they would be hanged for treason, they would never surrender. General Howe's strategy, therefore, had two parts. First, he sent a large number of troops to capture New York City. This would separate New England from the South and demonstrate to Americans that they could not win. The second part of Howe's strategy was diplomatic. He invited delegates from the Continental Congress to a peace conference. Howe promised that rebels would lay down their arms and swore loyalty to the king would be pardoned. When the Americans realized that Howe had no authority to negotiate a compromise, they refused to talk further. Battles in the North. Although the British had sent a huge force to seize New York City, the Congress asked Washington to try to defend it. To do so, Washington moved much of his army to Long Island. British troops attacked them in the summer of 1776. Many American soldiers fled, and some 1,500 were wounded or killed. The British captured New York City and used it as their headquarters for the rest of the war. Washington moved most of his remaining troops from Manhattan Island to White Plains, New York. Around this time, Washington sent volunteer Captain Nathan Hale to spy on the British. Although Hale was disguised, He was caught by the British and hanged. Brave until the end and based on tradition, Hale's last words were, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Crossing the Delaware. At the Battle of White Plains in October 1776, the British surprised Washington by heading toward Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress was meeting, instead of going to White Plains. Washington's troops moved quickly to get there ahead of the British. As both armies headed towards Philadelphia, the British stopped their advance and dispersed into winter camps in New Jersey. At this point, Washington tried something daring, a winter attack. In the 1700s, armies did not usually fight in the winter because of the weather and scarce food supplies. On December 25, 1776, Washington led some 2,400 men across the Delaware River and attacked a camp at Trenton in the middle of a sleet storm. They killed or captured almost 1,000 Haitian mercenaries there. Several days later, Washington forces scattered 3 British regiments near Princeton. Philadelphia falls. In early 1777, British General John Burgoyne, based in Quebec, developed a plan to isolate New England. Unfortunately for the British, they did not coordinate the plan. Burgoyne began marching south from Montreal on June 17, 1777, and General Howe did not move his 15,000 troops until July 23rd, when they traveled by ship to Maryland and attacked Philadelphia. Howe defeated Washington at the Battle of Brandywine Creek and captured Philadelphia, but the Continental Congress escaped and no Loyalist uprising occurred. Howe failed to destroy the Continental Army, which set up its winter camp at Valley Forge. Joining Washington at Valley Forge were 2 European military officers, the Marquis de Lafayette from France and Baron Friedrich von Steuben from Prussia. These officers helped Washington improve discipline and boost morale, or feeling of confidence, among the weary troops despite the camp's harsh conditions. Bitter cold and food shortages killed more than 2,000 men. The Battle of Saratoga. In June 1777, General Burgoyne and about 5,500 troops marched from Quebec into New York. Another 900 troops were under the command of Colonel Barry St. Leger, headed down the St. Lawrence to the eastern end of Lake Ontario. There, they joined more than 1,000 allied Iroquois warriors and headed east towards Albany. Iroquois nations, split by tied alliance to both the colonies and Britain, fought on both sides of the conflict. At first, Burgoyne's troops easily seized Fort Ticonderoga. The Congress fired the region's commander and replaced him with General Horatio Gates. Meanwhile, the British and Iroquois forces were driven back by American troops led by General Benedict Arnold. Burgoyne's march slowed to a crawl when American troops cut off their food supply. In desperation, Burgoyne retreated to Saratoga, where he was quickly surrounded by an American army. On October 17, 1777, he surrendered to General Gates. More than 5,000 British soldiers were taken prisoner. The victory improved American morale. Benjamin Franklin and others were sent to France in September 1776 to ask for troops. The French had not been willing to risk war until they believed the Americans could win. Because of the victory at Saratoga, the French were convinced. On February 6, 1778, the United States signed 2 treaties. France became the first country to recognize the United States as an independent nation. The second treaty allied the United States and France. By June 1778, Britain and France were at war. The War in the West. Not all the fighting in the Revolutionary War took place in the East. In 1778, Patriot George Rogers Clark took 175 troops down the Ohio River and captured several towns. By February 1779, the British had surrendered, giving the Americans control of the region. In July 1778, Thayendanegea, known as Chief Joseph Brant, joined the British with 4 Iroquois nations and attacked western Pennsylvania. The following summer, they were defeated by American troops. These battles destroyed the power of the Iroquois people. Farther south, the Cherokees suffered a similar fate after they attacked settlers in Virginia, and North Carolina militia units retaliated by setting fire to hundreds of Cherokee towns. The war at sea. Americans fought the British at sea as well as on land. Instead of attacking the British fleet directly, American warships attacked British merchant ships. By the war's end, millions of dollars of cargo had been seized, seriously harming Britain's trade and economy. Perhaps the most famous naval battle of the war involved the American naval officer John Paul Jones. Jones attacked the British warship Serapis, but the heavier guns of the British ship nearly sank Jones' ship. When the British commander called on Jones to surrender, Jones replied, "I have not yet begun to fight." The battle lasted more than 3 hours before the British surrendered. Battles in the South. After the British defeat at Saratoga, General Howe resigned. He was replaced by Sir Henry Clinton, who ordered British troops in Philadelphia to abandon the city and return to New York City. Clinton wanted to gather all his forces in one place before beginning a new campaign. Washington ordered his forces at Valley Forge to intercept the British. The two sides met at the Battle of Monmouth, the last major battle in the North. Either side won, but for the first time, American troops were able to stand up against the British in a conventional battle. After Clinton reached New York, he began a campaign in the South, where the British had the strongest loyalist support. The British hoped to keep the South, even if they lost the North. The struggle in the Carolinas. In December 1778, some 3,500 British troops captured Savannah, Georgia. They seized control of Georgia's backcountry and returned the British royal governor to power. The next objective was to capture Charlestown, South Carolina, the largest city in the South. Clinton attacked Charlestown, his forces quickly surrounding the city, trapping the American forces inside. On May 12, 1780, the Americans surrendered. About 5,500 Americans were taken prisoner, the greatest American defeat in the war. After capturing Charlestown, Clinton returned to New York, leaving General Charles Cornwallis in command. The Continental Congress then sent General Horatio Gates to defend the South Carolina backcountry. His attempt to destroy a British supply base at Camden, South Carolina, failed. Battle of Kings Mountain. After the Battle of Camden, the British began subduing the Carolina backcountry. Two British cavalry officers, Banastre Tarleton and Patrick Ferguson, led many of the Loyalist forces in the region. These troops became known for their brutality. Enraged at Ferguson's tactics, the Over-Mountain Men, as they were known, put together a militia. They intercepted Ferguson at Kings Mountain on October 7, 1780, and destroyed his army. By late 1781, the British controlled very little of the South. The Battle of Yorktown. In the spring of 1781, Cornwallis marched into Virginia. There, he joined forces with Benedict Arnold, a former American general who had changed sides to fight for the British. The British gave him command of British troops and ordered him to Virginia. After Arnold joined Cornwallis, the British began to conquer Virginia. Then, a large American force led by General Anthony Wayne arrived. Outnumbered and too far inland, Cornwallis retreated to the coastal town of Yorktown to protect his supplies and to maintain communication by sea. Cornwallis's retreat created an opportunity. Washington decided to march on New York City with 6,000 French troops. As the troops headed to New York, Washington learned that Admiral de Grasse and his French fleet were sailing north from the Caribbean to the Chesapeake Bay. Washington canceled the attack on New York City. Instead, he and the French general Rochambeau headed to Yorktown. Rochambeau's fleet cut off the flow of supplies to Cornwallis and prevented him from escaping by sea. On September 28, 1781, American and French forces surrounded Yorktown and began to bombard it. On October 14, Washington's aide, Alexander Hamilton, led an attack that captured key British defenses. 3 days later, Cornwallis began negotiations to surrender, and on October 19, 1781, some 8,000 British soldiers laid down their weapons. The Treaty of Paris. In March 1782, Parliament voted to begin peace negotiations. John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay conducted most of the negotiations for the United States. On September 3, 1783, 3 treaties were signed between Britain and the United States and between Britain and France and Spain. In the final settlement, known as the Treaty of Paris, Britain recognized the United States of America as an independent nation, with the Mississippi River as its western border. Britain gave Florida back to Spain, and France received colonies in Africa and the Caribbean. On November 24, 1783, the last British troops left New York City. The American Revolution was over, and a new nation was born.